June 15th, 1944, Saipan, Mariana Islands. The jungle was on fire. Flames licked the palm trunks as black smoke rolled across the ridges. The ground trembled under the thunder of artillery and the deep mechanical growl of tanks pushing through coral and sand. Sergeant Tom Ellison of the U.S. 18th Marine Tank Battalion leaned out of his M4 Sherman's hatch, goggles streaked with grime and sweat. "Driver, slow it down. Coral ahead." The reply came through static. "Can't slow down, Sarge. We'll bog down in the sand." Ahead of him, Japanese machine guns opened up, tracer rounds flashing through the smoke. The tank's hull rang as bullets ricocheted harmlessly off its armor. Ellison ducked, shouting to his gunner, "Target that ridge. He shall now." A thunderous boom echoed through the jungle as the Sherman's 75mm cannon roared, sending a shell smashing into a Japanese bunker carved into volcanic rock. The explosion blew sand and bamboo skyward. The Americans cheered over the intercom. Inside that bunker, what remained of a Japanese gun crew lay amid the rubble. One survivor, Corporal Tanaka Hiroshi, stumbled outside, clutching his rifle. He stared in disbelief at the Sherman rolling forward, scorched, battered, but unstoppable. He had seen one of these tin cans before, at Tarawa. Flimsy, easy to burn. That was the story they had been told, but this one wasn't stopping. Tanaka raised his Type 99 rifle and fired. One shot, then another. The bullets sparking uselessly off the tank's front plate. The machine turned its turret slowly, deliberately, like a beast noticing a fly. He ran. Behind him, the Sherman fired again. The blast threw him face first into the mud. When he looked up, the world was on fire, and the tank kept moving. Hours later, the battle quieted. Dozens of Shermans sat along the edge of the beachhead, engines still idling. Mechanics worked in the heat, wiping oil from their hands, tightening bolts, refilling fuel. The air smelled of gasoline, blood, and victory. Ellison climbed down, lighting a cigarette. He glanced at a line of Japanese Type 95 Heigo tanks captured nearby. Smaller, riveted, obsolete. "Hell," he muttered, "these things look like toys next to ours." His crew laughed, but Ellison wasn't mocking the enemy. He'd seen what they could do. Ambushes from caves, suicidal counterattacks, men crawling under tanks with grenades. But still, the Sherman kept coming, even crippled by coral, its tracks mangled, its armor pitted. The M4 rolled on. That night, as rain poured down, the Marines huddled beside their tanks. Lightning flashed over the beach, illuminating the burned skeletons of trees and twisted metal. Ellison exhaled smoke into the storm. "They call her a tin can," he said quietly, tapping the Sherman's side. "But she's a tin can that never quits." Odie, he was right. Across the Pacific, from Tarawa to Tinian, the tin can was becoming a nightmare the Japanese couldn't stop. A machine that refused to die, fueled by the sheer industrial power of a nation that built 50,000 of them and could replace every loss before breakfast. And on Saipan, that truth was just beginning to show.
February 20th, 1945, Iwo Jima. The earth itself seemed to burn. Black volcanic sand clung to boots, uniforms, and tank treads like tar. The beach was a graveyard of landing craft and twisted metal. Smoke rose in oily columns from the base of Mount Suribachi, where Japanese guns thundered from tunnels invisible to the naked eye. Inside Sherman Tank Inferno 2, Sergeant Tom Ellison gripped the handrail as his driver gunned the engine. "Keep her steady, Bill. Watch that pit." The driver's voice came through the intercom, tight with fear. "We're sinking. These tracks ain't built for ash." The tank's treads dug deep into the volcanic soil, struggling for traction. All around them, Marines were pinned down under machine gun fire, digging into whatever cover they could find. Every few seconds, a shell slammed into the ground, throwing up fountains of black sand. A corporal on the radio screamed, "We need armor forward. There's a pillbox spitting fire on the left flank." Ellison grabbed the turret phone. Roger that. We're moving. The Sherman lurched forward, every gear screaming under strain. Its armor was already scarred with shrapnel from Japanese 47mm anti-tank guns hidden in caves. Inside one of those caves, Lieutenant Okada Masaru, commander of an IJA anti-tank detachment, squinted through the gun sight. His loader, trembling, fed a shell into the chamber. Okada whispered, "Wait for the flank." The side armor's weak. The Sherman rolled past, its engine growling. Okada gave the order, "Fire!" The gun roared, and the shell smashed into the Sherman's left track. The tank jolted violently, sparks flying. "Hit! Left tread's gone!" shouted the driver. "Rotate turret now." Ellison barked. The gunner swung the turret toward the source of the flash. Through the periscope, he saw the muzzle of the Japanese gun reloading in the cave mouth. He fired point blank. The 75mm He shell hit the rock face like thunder, collapsing the cave in a rain of molten sand and shattered stone. Silence followed, just the crackling of flames. Ellison wiped sweat from his brow, heart pounding. "Still think she's a tin can?" he muttered. The tank couldn't move anymore, but it didn't matter. The crew turned their Sherman into a fortress, using it as a bunker for the pinned Marines. Ammunition was passed hand to hand, barrels glowing from constant fire. By dusk, the Japanese counterattack had been crushed. Dozens of Sherman tanks stood crippled, half buried, or scorched black, but still there. Still fighting. The next morning, when the flag went up on Mount Suribachi, Ellison's crew climbed onto their tank, watching the stars and stripes flutter against the smoke-filled sky. Private Joe Kelly, the loader, stared in silence. "You think anyone back home knows what these machines go through?" Ellison smiled faintly. "Doesn't matter if they don't. The Japanese sure as hell do now." Far below, Japanese soldiers picked their way through the ruins of their defenses. Lieutenant Okada, one arm broken and face smeared with soot, stared at the wrecked Shermans across the beach. Their armor was pitted, their guns blackened, yet they still pointed toward his island like iron fists. He muttered to himself, "They build them faster than we can kill them." The thought chilled him more than the defeat itself. In the Pacific, where terrain and weather destroyed everything, the Sherman refused to die. It wasn't elegant, and it wasn't the most powerful tank in the world, but it worked. Through coral, ash jungle, and mud, through heat, rust, and relentless combat, the American tin can proved something terrifying to the Imperial Japanese Army. The war machine they mocked could crawl through hell and keep moving. And on every island that burned beneath the rising sun, the thunder of its engine became a promise. "We're coming next." May 1945, Okinawa. The sky over the island wept without end. Rain turned the battlefield into a sea of mud, a relentless quagmire that swallowed hope and bogged down the machines of war. Yet, through this hellscape, one M4 Sherman tank, christened Lucky 7, clawed its way forward. Inside, Sergeant Tom Ellison gripped the controls, his knuckles white. Every inch gained felt like a mile won against an island determined to break them. Outside, the infantry support was stalled, pinned down by unseen enemies and swallowed by the same mud that threatened to consume his tank. Ellison could feel the exhaustion of his crew seeping into the steel hull, a bone-deep weariness that matched his own. Through his periscope, he saw Captain Sato Yori on a distant ridge, a lone, defiant figure against the gray sky, directing fire. The pressure mounted with every passing second, every shell that screamed overhead. A decision had to be made, and it had to be made now. "Kelly, load he. We're taking that ridge, with or without them." Ellison's voice cut through the drone of the engine. The Sherman roared, its tracks churning desperately for purchase. It was a brutal, grinding assault. The tank shuddered as it took hits, but its guns spat fire, silencing the fortified positions one by one. The cost was immense, measured in spent shells and frayed nerves, but the ridge fell silent. The advance could continue, but the price of victory was etched on every soldier's face. As the rain softened to a drizzle, a profound quiet descended upon the valley. The battlefield was a graveyard of twisted metal and shattered trees. Ellison climbed out of the turret, the cool air a stark contrast to the stifling heat inside. He looked at Lucky 7, scarred and muddy, but intact. He thought about why they survived. It wasn't just the tank's armor or its firepower. It was something more. It was the sheer, stubborn refusal to quit, an endurance shared by both man and machine. As darkness fell, the engines of Lucky 7 rumbled to life once more, a steady heartbeat in the long night, ready to push on. The war demanded it. If this story of grit and endurance moved you, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more tales from history. Thank you for watching. August 1945, Tokyo. The fires had long gone out, but the city still smelled of smoke. Captain Sato Yori, now a prisoner of war, sat in a railcar overlooking the ruins. He watched as American trucks rumbled through the streets, jeeps, Shermans, supply vehicles, endless lines of motion. They were quiet, efficient, unstoppable. The same noise he had heard in the jungles, now echoing through the heart of his fallen empire. Beside him, a young officer whispered, "How did they win, sir?" "We were warriors." "They were ... mechanics." Sato turned his head slowly, his voice barely a murmur. "No, they were both. But their machines fought as faithfully as their men." Outside, a Sherman tank rolled past, its white star gleaming against the ruins of Tokyo Station. Its tracks crushed rubble underfoot, not as a conqueror, but as proof of endurance. Sato stared after it, eyes hollow. "The empire of the rising sun," he said softly, "was beaten by machines that refused to stop rising." Across the Pacific, Sergeant Tom Ellison stood on the deck of a transport ship bound for home. His Sherman, scarred, patched, and tired, was chained below deck, headed for decommission. He looked out over the endless water and said quietly, "They'll melt her down. Build something new from her steel." He smiled faintly. "Maybe that's what winning means, not strength, just the ability to rebuild." The sun sank low behind the horizon. The sea shimmered gold. And somewhere, deep below in the cargo hold, the heartbeat of the Sherman echoed one last time, quiet, steady, immortal.